hopefully you guys get a chance to still tune in on the program today on a Peel Yourself Off the Mat Monday. And that's what a lot of us are doing on this particular day. Jeff DeForest and Mike Lubitz. Lubie already busy texting away like a maniac, trying to make sure that the show goes smoothly. Exactly. And Lubie, how are you on this fine Monday as we peel ourselves off the mat once again here on Ion Channel?
I am happy to be here. I'm happy to be doing the show. And it was like you talk about it, I'm trying to clean my eyeballs out after a very, very hectic NFL playoff weekend.
Had to gargle with Visine on the Saturday or yesterday, actually, with 3 games yesterday, 2 games on Saturday in the National Football League. I've mentioned this many, many times. I think it's true of a lot of people. Everybody loved the wild card weekend. You talk all season long about who's going to make the playoffs, and there's a natural anxiety and or euphoria about whether or not your team is going to make it. The Dolphins actually were in there. We operate out of Miami, still in there with a little bit of a shot. And then because they didn't make it, chaos ensued and all kinds of turmoil broke loose, including finding out that everybody hated Brian Flores in the Dolphins upper management. And yet, you know what? That would be a tough one, right? If you left a place and all of a sudden all this dirt came out about how you didn't get along with anybody and you thought everybody was a bozo and you treated people poorly and you psyched out your own young quarterback, saying things to him that may be permanently devastating, except for Tua's Hawaiian nature, right? Where, with the Maui Wowie that people are smoking around there, you could just get a contact high and realize, hey, life is short. What am I going to get all upset about what people think about me if they don't think I'm good enough to be a standout quarterback in the pros? So maybe he was able to shake that off without too much psycho damage. Some quarterbacks, like a lot of on-air talent, will be. Let's face it, we don't like criticism, do we?
No. It's got to be very
don't
well
love
done.
it. Somebody says, hey, your show sucks and you look horrible on video, and you're thinking to yourself, you know what? I don't feel so good about that. I'm going to crawl into my little Cancer, astrological sign shell and maybe never come out again. But it is interesting that, I mean, how do you dodge that question in the interview when the people are across the table saying, okay, Brian, you won a lot of ball games, but why are you such an asshole to the organization?
Exactly.
What do you say? I mean, this was a guy that was looking supposedly for, beyond complete control of what was going on with this Dolphin team. And for them to get rid of him after he had rallied this team in 3 separate seasons to come back, I guess, they were doing all right in the second year, most of the way through. It wasn't as ugly as the first year when they lost their first 7 and looked like absolute trash in the process. They couldn't make a line big enough.
No.
For the Dolphins to cover. It was just an outrage. And then it kind of came storming through when they had even less talent on the team. And it was even more of a compromising situation for Flores. They went on and won 5 of their last 9 games, including beating the Patriots and sending them reeling into a tougher position in the postseason, which ultimately cost them a shot, I guess, of winning a championship. That year, as they had to go on the road to Denver instead of it really upset the apple cart.
Yeah.
So Flores was quite accomplished, I guess, as an on-field 1-loss record type of coach. But interesting. I mean, that would be a tough question to get through in the interview. And I bring this up because your man Eric Bienemy, who supposedly doesn't interview well, so far has only been linked to one job, and he's one of like 7 candidates there. So that can knock you out of the mix, I guess, in the long run. Although with the Rooney Rule and everybody trying to be in compliance of that, the first call is right to Bienemy saying, okay, hey, Eric, why don't you come in, man? Oh, no, you're never going to get the job.
Well, that's the thing. They're not even Rooney ruling him. It feels like Flores is either seriously considered or Rooney ruling. Bienemy's not even out there. Like, it's weird.
No. Yeah, I mean, some teams have interviewed Jamie Foxx before they interviewed Eric Bienemy, right? The guy's not even a coach, right? But, okay, we brought in a black guy. He never had a job before as a head coach. Worked his way up through the ranks. He played, a football player in the movies, so why not, bring him in for an interview and satisfy the parameters of the Rooney Rule. But that is of little significance after all the action that we had over the weekend, and it's now expanded to 6 playoff games. There's still another one coming up tonight between the Los Angeles Rams and the Arizona Cardinals, a couple of very mysterious teams that are hard to gauge. I have the Cardinals tonight, by no great opinion of my own. I consider the game to be somewhat of a toss-up, so you may as well have the Cardinals plus a few points. Now, I'm not getting as many points as most people are, because once again, and I hope you're watching, Francesco, Jewish Journal, is that where you're getting lines? Really? Now, it wasn't that much of a factor in some of the games, the points that he has shaved off of these lines. And he'll start screaming at me. This is a guy that I've been booking his action for the last few years, and so far in the playoffs, postseason, not necessarily his game, as he stands now at 1-4 after 5 games.
Getting some units back. Look at you.
The one game I liked, I really did. I mentioned this on the show, so and I think we can go back and track this. I don't know that I had an overwhelmingly convincing opinion about it, but I did think that Buffalo was playing much better ball at this time of the season as they came down the stretch there. They had that one little hiccup where they lost a couple of games, and especially glaring was the one to Jacksonville when they lost like 9-6 or whatever that was. Just horrendous. And then people started throwing all of the usual criticisms back at Josh Allen that he'd been hearing for the last couple of years, that he's a little bit wild and, he doesn't necessarily have complete command over the passing game. But they did get it together, and their last few games were extremely impressive, and they couldn't have been any more impressive than they were against the New England Patriots, who seemed to be tailing off. And in that game, you were laying 4.5. And you know what was great about that, Lubie? It was never a factor.
No.
I mean, they scored touchdowns. Did they not score touchdowns on their first 7 drives? I think they had 7 drives in the game of any significance, and they scored on all of them. I mean, just mowed right down the field. They went 80 yards, 70 yards, 80 yards. And you're looking at Belichick on the sidelines there, and you knew he was resigned to the idea that there was no chance that the Patriots were going to be competitive. The weather wasn't overwhelmingly prohibitive, even though it was, as we say about Buffalo, it's fucking freezing in the summertime. They have one day of Indian summer in July in that area of New York and New York State. Because people think of it as New York City, but it couldn't be any further away. I mean, it's like Tallahassee versus Miami in terms of the way the cities are, I guess, in terms of the human condition there. And also, just general conditions, because it's freezing in Buffalo all the time. And it was -5 wind chill factor, 7 degrees in actual temperature. But the wind wasn't blowing like it was in the previous meeting when the Patriots outfoxed McDermott and the Buffalo Bills and ran the ball 300 times in the ballgame, threw just 3 passes with Mac Jones. They were forced to put the ball in the air because they were trailing, and it didn't work out so well. But Buffalo looked like the superior team, and that definitely looks like the 2 best teams in the AFC are going to meet in the divisional playoff round, which will be Kansas City hosting the Buffalo Bills. The other game now is going to be Tennessee, the number 1 seed, who sat out with the bye in the wild card weekend, and they will take on the Cincinnati Bengals, which was that was a great game to watch. I really enjoyed that. I was rooting for the Bengals to finally get off the so-called schneid. Sorry, Leslie Visser. I know she hates those kind of words when I start using Jewish slang.
Is schneid Jewish?
Schneid's not really Jewish, is it?
Schneid, that's why schneid is one you always bring in with schmuck and schmank. But schneid, I don't think is Yiddish.
I think it's a universal term.
Yeah,
Leslie, I'm sorry.
Yiddish.
I love you, but I think schneid is well accepted. In fact, I think I even saw it in one of the headlines in the sports section today that Vancouver got off to schneid.
Exactly.
The Vancouver Canucks had lost like 9 in a row or something like that, and they finally won a hockey game, and it actually said right there in the headlines, Vancouver gets off the schneid.
It's a U.S. slang. U.S. slang. It stands for a losing streak.
I have the headline right here. Leslie, I'm sorry. I love you. I really do.
That's not a Yiddish term. That's not
it
Yiddish.
Says, Canucks. Can you read that, Lubie? Canucks get off the schneid. No,
not
you can't see that.
But again, schneid. When you've always linked that.
Schneid in the paper. What are you talking about?
My grandma wasn't saying schneid when I was growing up.
Schnook,
so I think schneid is acceptable. Now schmuck, I don't know, and some of the other things you throw out.
Schmuck is considered more derogatory. And normally when we were doing terrestrial radio, I would hesitate. Yeah. I never used the word schmuck because somebody from the B'nai B'rith would have called in and go, he said something awful on the air. As if I had embraced Hitler or something and put a swastika behind me like I was Marge Schott. with Shotzi marching, to a goose step,
God.
just to go take a leak. Anyway, good to be with you guys today. It was a great football weekend all the way around, and many other things were happening. I started out, actually, I missed you at this thing that was happening in town here in Fort Lauderdale, the Fort Lauderdale Food and Wine Festival.
Yeah.
So I went to that barbecue bash with Mike Mayo, the gambling gourmet. Mayo's quick, to judge things, too. He takes like one bite. The first thing that he had, you would have thought that he had just bitten into a McRib sandwich. He was like, yuck, I don't need another bite of this.
He flung it.
So they were probably going to finish 10th. Oh, O.J. McDuffie was there, the great O.J. McDuffie.
Juice. Nice.
What a delightful guy. You know what? I've always said this about O.J., the former Miami Dolphin, and my friend Southern Brian, who came out. You met Southern Brian at the radio show we were doing Friday.
I've met him a bunch of times now. I've met him like 5 times. He's a great dude.
Yeah. And I do want to salute the guys at Cut Above Butcher Shop. I was bound.
I think great.
I ended up drinking like a bottle of Stag's Leap Chardonnay while doing the show, and it was too much for me.
I know.
Combined with other form of inebriants.
I've never seen you leave wine. That was impressive.
I couldn't finish it. But it was very good. I'm going to have to acquire a couple of bottles of that because it was great. Now is that relatively expensive? That Stag's Leap, I want to say.
I don't think it's cheap. I don't think it's garbage.
You see it in a restaurant, it's going to cost you, probably set you back $50 maybe.
I don't know, but
so what would that make it? About a $25-$30 bottle of wine, on any kind of retail market. But nonetheless, that was great. And so we were there. And Southern Brian is a barbecue wizard, so I invited him to come out to this thing. And he also had very strong opinions about the stuff that was going on. And he met the juice, O.J. McDuffie.
Nice. But
the guy's from Atlanta, and, he wasn't really that familiar with O.J. McDuffie. And he said, who's O.J. McDuffie?
That's crazy.
I said, well, O.J. McDuffie was an excellent Dolphin football player, a legend at Penn State, where he starred and became a first-round pick, late first round of the Dolphins. There was that big debate. We always talk with the juice about that. And I would have to say, when it was happening, and this filled hours and hours. It used to be easy doing sports talk in South Florida. I don't know if it's the same around the country, because guys just want to yell and scream at each other about contrived debatable topics. We were never really that into that sort of spectrum of sports talk, were we?
No, you just let the people do that. You just let the callers come in and yell and scream. Like, that's what I grew up was my dad loving to listen to people yell and scream. That's why I never understood sports talk, because I was like, who just wants to listen to people yell? Like, I don't get it.
And the hosts would instigate it,
yes,
right?
Always,
you'd have a host like the great Hank Goldberg, the caller would call in and say, hey, Hank, it's a real nice day outside. Pleasure to be on your show. And you go,
what? Nice day? What, are you kidding me?
What do you mean?
How can you say it's a nice day? I just lost 2,000 at the track.
I'll never forget. It was Passover, and my dad called in. He never called in because I was in the car, and he ripped Jay Fiedler. And Hank on air was like, hung up on him mid-sentence, said, these guys must be anti-Semites if they're going to rip Jay Fiedler in the middle of Passover. And I was like, what? Or Yom Kippur or something. I was like,
hey,
we're Jewish.
He ate like a yarmulke on the air while he was eating,
but it was great.
Whatever food was being provided for him at the time. I think I'm going to see Hank when I'm out in Las Vegas in a couple of weeks.
You should.
I'm going to try and stop in and see how the great Hank Goldberg is doing. A South Florida legend and known around the country because he was doing the handicapping for ESPN for many, many years. He took over the role of Pete Axtell, who was one of the all-time greats. We got to know Pete from hanging around at the track. And another one, Lubie, who left us way too soon. Wow, what a great character. You would have loved this guy. I mean, he was a real Damon Runyon type. Always a little bit disheveled, wearing like a jacket and tie because he was always on TV. I think he did a lot of work with NBC also, but Pete Axtell was one of the real brilliant characters, very much like a degenerate version of what Bert Sugar was to boxing. Pete Axtell was like a go-to guy, and Hank replaced him in that role, so was well known around the country. And then he had that one big season. This is all we need to do, Lubie. And I've been telling Jack this also from my own channel. If we could have one good year picking games, that's it. We're set for life. You could lose the next 20 seasons, and everybody just remembers the time. Oh, yeah, I rode his back all the way. I won 20 times. I buried my bookmaker that year. And it doesn't matter that in the ensuing 19 years, you lost your ass. Week after week, game after game, 1-4, 0-5, 2-3 was a good week, right? And yet, I mean, that one claim to fame, he was monstrous. He was like going 4-1, 5-0 every week for about 15 straight weeks. And that was it. Became international legend, Hank Goldberg, the great Hank Goldberg. But he cursed out your dad on Passover, huh? And called him an anti-Semite.
Your father, high holidays.
As Jewish a Jewish guy as you could possibly get. I mean, he's a Jewish Jew.
Like what anti-Semite talks ill of Jay Fiedler on the high holidays? And I was like, anyone who's sane.
Jay Fiedler was one of the nicest guys I
dude.
ever came across on the Dolphin scene. A real gentleman. His father was a great coach. And he played as hard and as well as he possibly could, but he just wasn't the prototype. I hate to say it, but you may be. I think is Tua Tagovailoa a better quarterback than Jay Fiedler?
To me, yes, but probably no.
Wow.
He may not as of yet. Probably not. Fiedler actually had decent success. He just always seemed to botch it at the end, like at the end of a game. Like that Raider playoff game, like they had the game and then the Jets games where he would throw these ridiculous interceptions, and that's what I remember him for. And that probably wasn't his entire time, so I'm doing him disservice, I guess.
Well, it's funny because I do remember when everybody fell in love with Jay Fiedler as a potential quarterback for the Dolphins, including the Miami Dolphins themselves, and it was when they were getting trounced by Jacksonville, 62-7. When they went on the road to Jacksonville to play in a playoff game. And was that Marino's last year? I think, that's when Marino decided to hang it up. And I think even Jimmy said, that's it for me. And he did come back and coach another year, Jimmy Johnson. But they got crushed like a grape. And I remember, and I've told the story many times, I was on my way to the press box, which was somewhere, I would have been better off just renting a little space on one of Jeff Bezos's rockets. Because you had to go, like 32,000 feet up in the air. So you had to take an elevator to get up there. And I'm in the elevator with an old, stodgy guy, the kind of guy that, elevator operator is not necessarily a glamour position, even though, any work is good work. I don't denounce anybody for whatever it is that they do. Because, look, we've been making a living doing this. And, some people would consider what we're doing a disgrace. How could you possibly take money for that? So anyway, there's some guy named Smitty. It's always a guy named Smitty. He's operating the elevator. Hey, Smitty, take him up to the press box. No, they're clear. So I get in the elevator. I'm the only guy in the elevator at that point, very early, way before the game, because I was doing a 4-hour pregame show on WIOD before the ball game got started. And I did that mostly myself. So I'm setting up in the press box at 8 in the morning for a 1:00 game.
Jeez.
And Smitty takes me upstairs, and I ask him something, just to pass a little conversation along. Because, it feels awkward, right? Everybody's in the elevator, and they're all staring at the floors. Like what floor it's going on. Nobody talks to each other.
The elevator ride is the most awkward ride. No one ever talks.
Right? People start smelling their own armpits to see if it's them. I thought I had deodorant on. Nobody talks. You're afraid somebody's going to fart.
This is universal. I've been in elevator rides in Europe, elevator rides East and West Coast in America, in Thailand. Elevator rides are universally awkward wherever you go.
Weird, yeah. How about that time we were in a hotel in San Francisco there where only one person could actually fit in the elevator, and we tried to squeeze in 4 and suitcases? Another Chris Visser special. Although we owe Chris a lot for helping us out with those Radio Row accommodations that we got. But this one, San Francisco, is very pricey, right? It's like $3,000 to live in a Porta Center.
Now I don't even want to know
San Francisco.
That's
so
what it is.
A hotel's not exactly on the cheap either. And to find something around a Super Bowl that was anywhere near where you wanted to be, it was not an easy thing. But so I get in the elevator with Smitty there, and sure enough, I said something about Mark Brunell, who was quarterbacking at the time. And he said, you know what? The other guy's a better quarterback. So I'm thinking, the other guy? Who the hell is the other guy? And the other guy, of course, was Jay Fiedler, who had come in. Brunell had been injured intermittently throughout the season, and Fiedler had played some significant time. And the people of Jacksonville were convinced that Mark Brunell was a fairly accomplished pro quarterback. Would you say that Mark Brunell, he wasn't a Hall of Famer, but wasn't bad, right? Mark Brunell had some real good seasons for the Jacksonville Jaguars. And for the fact that Smitty, who you would think would be a guy in the know because he hears what everybody has to say, right? He's riding the general managers up there and they're saying, we ought to play Jay Moore. And they all love Fiedler. And Fiedler came in after Brunell had started the blowout. And it was clear that the Dolphins were just going to get trounced in this game. But Fiedler came in. It wasn't really quite garbage time yet. And he looked great. Absolutely amazing. And you thought, wow, I wish this guy was the next Dolphins quarterback. And sure enough, that's what he became. But wasn't really the prototype. I mean, you kind of need to be somewhat in that category, do you not? Jalen Hurts, were you impressed with what he had to do yesterday? I'm amazed he's gotten as far as he has as a pro quarterback, Jalen Hurts.
Yep.
And actually took a team, somewhat into the playoffs. But that game just doesn't work when you're going against the really good teams that have stud defenses. That whole game that we saw it with Lamar Jackson, right? Who's a better version of Jalen Hurts.
Yes. At
that type of quarterback play. And, he gets to the postseason, and all of a sudden they figure out a way to stymie the guy. So that was blowout city, the Philadelphia game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. It was ugly. The Buccaneers looked great. Tom Brady looked fantastic as always.
Yeah.
And so the Buccaneers now with a very favorable route, as they will. What are they getting the winner of tonight's game? Yeah,
I think so.
They get either the Rams, who would travel across the country to play the Buccaneers after playing on a Monday night, or. Is the league just setting this up deliberately so Tom Brady can be back in the Super Bowl?
Yes.
And I keep coming back to this because it bothers me. It seems like a bad edit, doesn't it, Lubie? You do a lot of editing.
I do.
When you're editing sound clips and things like that, putting together the opening, which you were putting together. Yeah, he was scrambling up until 6:59:50. Put together those Larinaga cuts. Which he's right. I mean, and leave it to Jim Larinaga, always a gentleman, not to say that was a bullshit call.
Well, it was great. He found a way to say it without anyway getting fined. It was amazing. Good for him.
Yeah, and you could tell, though. I mean, it is true. If you went up for that shot at the end of a ball game in the park, right? It's like 11-10, and this is going to be the winning basket. You're already in kind of extra points or overtime in a half-court game. Because you're going to have to take it to 12 because it's win by 2, right, Lubie?
You got to do
always win by 2.
Deuce, yep.
Yeah, people that played win by 1.
I've never heard of
that was also a bunch of BS. But and if you took that shot and said, "I got it,"
No way.
It's like you got what?
No way.
Right?
Or you'd either not give it to them, or if you give it to them, you'd finish the game, and then there would be a fight. 100%. Like he was 100% right.
It was a weird thing, but and this was kind of a New York thing. Even though you might be yelling and screaming about it, calls, no matter how bad, were usually honored.
Yes.
If a guy said, "I got it,"
you would just mock him.
You knew he was a whining baby, and it was all a bunch of crap, and he hadn't been touched. There was nobody within half a mile of the guy. You would fire the ball back at him so that hopefully it would hit him right in the ball as you were checking the ball back in. Okay, you got it. Boom. Give him one of those.
Always.
That's kind of what Larinaga implied.
Yeah,
I mean,
100%.
Imagine he's playing in basketball. This would have been, late 50s, early 60s, when he was a kid. And, I guess, maybe even into the mid 60s and
60s.
Yeah, that he's playing a lot of basketball in parks in New York City where he grew up, and he's playing in the Bronx. And if you made that call, forget about it.
Nah, no way.
Your house might get burnt down.
But you wouldn't make, that's the thing is, and that's why I'm a Knoll, and you weren't wrong by the book. There was contact twice going up, so you could call a foul there, but it was a close range shot. The guy absorbed the contact, had a clean look, and just bricked it. So most people would have bit their whistle and not called it. However, there was always one or two guys that called everything. Everything. And you would bitch about it.
Right.
Whatever, John.
Flailing their arms, even though you got all ball. And that would be that was all ball. That was all ball. I should have thrown that at Larry. He was a delight, by the way. If you want to catch that interview, that was on Thursday's edition of the Defo Show.
Yep.
And, of course, the great thing about Googling the Defo Show and the people at Ion Channel is that all of these shows are archived. If you want to catch a very entertaining basketball conversation, whether you're a Hurricanes basketball fan, an ACC fan, you just like the fact that they upset Duke at Cameron Indoor, Jim Larinaga, I mean that in all sincerity. Every time I even think about having him on the show, you're thinking, this is a basketball treasure chest right here in our town. And you heard it in the interview. It's kind of interesting because this is the town without pity, South Florida. where indifference is really, I mean, the most common characteristic of any fan here is almost total and blatant indifference.
What do you mean? The Panthers, and we're going to talk with Craig Minervini today because they're hitting like the 19, Murderers Row. They're putting up
21-3 at home. That's pretty amazing.
They're putting up so many goals every game. It's like, I'm like 9-4. I'm like, what the hell?
Yeah.
So it's like, all right, I think we should talk some Panthers. Who's talking Panthers? I don't know. There's no way anyone knows they're even playing.
You know what? I mean, the fact that you could probably easily get tickets for any home game the rest of the way is pretty remarkable. I mean, but they were selling false hope for a long, long time.
Yes.
And there was always a question about that. That was another one of the hotly debated topics in the old days, the heyday of sports talk, is whether or not hockey could make it here, whether baseball could make it here. But we already had football. Football was huge. It's a deep South type of mentality. The Dolphins had tremendous tradition. And Don Shula took these young men to a perfect season. I mean, you could hear Facenda as soon as you mentioned the Miami Dolphins. Yeah, you would hear, these brave young men are here to play a child's game. Although I was surprised my friends didn't recognize O.J. McDuffie. If you were a football fan, would you not know that name, O.J. McDuffie?
Look, he never became, I guess, like a Randy Moss because he wasn't high flying, so I don't know how much he got on SportsCenter. But if you watch football, he was the Dolphins' best receiver for like a decade.
Oh, man. Marino used to drill those passes in there and the triple coverage.
Lived off of OJ. Marino was like, I don't give a shit how many people are on the guy. Here.
There are certain people, though, that always make you feel good when you run into them. I mean, and OJ could easily have a little bit of an attitude. I don't know. I mean, you know, he wasn't that famous of a football player, obviously, that, you know, it was an automatic. Like if Marino's standing there, you think Southern Brian doesn't have any idea who he is?
Outside of my wife, everyone else on the planet knows who Dan Marino is.
Your wife would not recognize Dan Marino?
It's a big joke because when we go to the Segredo Roma nights in Roma, Marino will be there. And the first time I was like, because I know she's not big into sports, but everyone knows Marino. Marino's one person.
How do you not know Marino?
Everyone knows. Even at like Radio Row where there's famous people everywhere, Marino's one of the like 5 guys that everyone's like, oh my God, Marino. Yeah. So I'm like, oh, I'll introduce you to Dan. And she's like, Dan who? Okay. Dan Marino? She's like, Dan Marino.
Tana, yeah.
Like, babe, I love you.
Marino's always great at that thing because he actually seeks us out, which is pretty amazing. Yeah, I mean, well, quite a distinction. When he walked in, you know, that time, I guess Minneapolis is what I was thinking of when you mentioned the Radio Row, and Marino was there, and it was kind of like a last-minute thing, you know, like when Lawrence Taylor was on Radio Row, only a few people kind of knew that was happening. Yep. And fortunately, we were lucky enough to have a connection. You know, 2 times, you know, in the same situation, right? Everybody wants Marino. They're all tugging on him. And our good friend Fudge Brown was doing the PR for him and kind of leading him around to various sites where there's like 100 radio stations and everyone. And naturally, I mean, hey, you want Marino? Nah. We got this guy that wrote this pamphlet about how to understand the rules. We'll just blow off Marino for that. But, you know, and you know, she always goes out of her way to make sure that we get accommodated. And Marino, well, it was a delightful interview that day, but everybody's following him, right? I mean, there's a buzz when certain people come into the room. Yep. It's kind of like I've often told a story about I'm at the Main Street Gym in Los Angeles where there were only at the time, I guess you still had 13 divisions in boxing, but there were only the 2 alphabet soup organizations, World Boxing Council, one of my favorite organizations, and the World Boxing Association, which may be more crooked, but because Jose Suleiman was the face of corruption. Who would you say is the face of corruption in your lifetime? It might be Jose Suleiman, who was a founder and president of the World Boxing Council.
See, I always think of either the IOC guy or the FIFA guy. Those are the 2 to me that are always fun.
Juan Antonio Samaranch.
They're always the best.
Sepp Blatter, it was another beauty.
When they go to Utah and everyone's like, Utah?
Guy's driving a Bentley that he didn't own before he showed up in town there.
Those are the 2 best reactions ever.
Greet him at the airport, When
they said Utah and Qatar, both times it was like, what?
Corruption is great. I mean, let's face it, it's very pervasive and, infiltrated sports a long time ago and will always be there, or so it seems, because that was the big debate over the weekend about this call in a Cincinnati Raiders game. Get to that. But just to finish the point about Marino coming in and certain guys have a presence, you have, at the time, there were 26 world champions total, I mean, in the world. Yeah. we're talking about all countries involved. Okay, so of those, how many would really be training in a gym in L.A.? If you had like 6 world champions in there at one time, that's 6 of the 26.
That seems like a lot.
That's very significant, right? Because these guys could be from anywhere in the country. In addition to the fact that they could be from any other country among hundreds and thousands of other countries that possibly could be having a world boxing champion. So there are like 6 guys that legitimately hold one of the titles: WBA, WBC, different weight divisions in there. And Alexis Arguello was in town. I guess he was training for a fight maybe in Las Vegas, but he's spending a day in Los Angeles on a press tour. So he comes to the Main Street Gym for a workout while he was in town. And literally everybody stopped. It was one of those things where guys are on the speed bag. Here's a guy who's a WBC champion. Here's a heavyweight champion in the world. They all stopped. And this guy had such reverence among his contemporaries and other boxers. They all stopped and kind of like applauded as he made his way like to throw a couple of light jabs at the mirror there.
Well, boxers don't do that. Boxers are very like in their own world and in their own head.
Yeah.
That's crazy that they did that.
Yeah, so I mean, that's the kind of esteem and acclaim that Marino had. O.J. McDuffie didn't quite have that.
No.
That was the point. But is one of those guys, Leslie Visser, the aforementioned Leslie Visser, the lovely Italian one, has this quality. Yep. Just makes you feel good.
Yes.
Right? You could be any schlep. I walked over to OJ at this thing, and he gave me like such a warm greeting and embrace. I wasn't in the greatest of moods here, when I got in there, because I'm not really big on these sort of things. You know that. I don't like a lot of formal stuff. And this was casual, very well run, by the way, for a wine and food festival.
Good.
Lubie, because it wasn't one of those deals where you got a thimble full of wine.
Oh, good. Oh, thank God.
And also the portions were so small that it wasn't even worth attempting to try it. Now, you were going to eat from 10 different stations, Lubie. So what do? How do you pace yourself on that? Mayo was turning green by the time he was finished. And there was a lot of spicy stuff, too. I mean, it was Barbecue City over there.